Hi, this is Chuck of CloudAhoy. CloudAhoy is a system for flight debriefing. It logs your flight, and then when you are back on the ground, it helps you debrief the flight. Come join me as I fly to Oshkosh and debrief that flight. Before starting the engine, I launched the CloudAhoy application on my iPad. I put in my name, my co-pilot's name, tail number, and optional remarks. You can also use your iPhone to log the flight. The iPad and the iPhone CloudAhoy applications are very similar, but the iPad has also a debrief and a CFI tab, which the iPhone does not. Like many other CloudAhoy users, I have a Start CloudAhoy item on my checklist just before engine start, so I don't forget to log the flight. I tap Start, and I can pretty much forget about CloudAhoy until the end of the flight. By the way, CloudAhoy can run in the background, thus letting you use the iPad for other applications during flight. Back on the ground, it's now time to debrief the flight. I can debrief the flight from my CloudAhoy app on my iPad, or I can log in to any desktop or laptop computer and debrief the flight from there. I select the flight and I click debrief. The flight debrief tab has on the right side my flight track, overlaid in this case on satellite photos, and on the left the analysis of CloudAhoy. CloudAhoy tells me, for example, which runways I took off and landed on. It automatically segments the flight into flight segments that are color-coded. For example, it tells me that my takeoff from runway 28 was 1571 feet and 32 seconds. Some flight segments can further be opened to reveal information computed by CloudAhoy. For example, in this case, information about my departure, my level flights, and my approach to landing. By the way, the flight track can also be displayed on sectional charts, like here, as well as on terrain maps and published instrument approaches. I can display various flight profiles of selected segments. Here I am displaying the altitude and airspeed profile of the entire flight, circling here my level flight at 3,000 feet, as well as my climb to 4,500 feet at an average of 396 feet per minute. Let me now click on the approach segment to zoom in on the final approach to landing at Oshkosh. You can view the flight also in 3D. Here I am displaying a side view of the final of the flight with north up, and I can rotate the point of view to look at it from different angles. In this arrival, I was cleared to land on the yellow dot about the center of the runway. CloudAhoy's automatic segmentation shows the final in white, and it calculated a 2.1 degrees, very shallow approach, followed by the landing in red, 1,800 feet, and taxi, probably the longest taxi I ever taxied, at 8,300 feet, 15 minutes. Now, for every point along the flight path, CloudAhoy shows you the points parameters, such as the altitude, MSL, AGL, vertical speed, airspeed, ground speed, wind, and other parameters. CloudAhoy can show you the flight in cockpit view mode. Here I'm closing the left panel to show more of the cockpit view mode. This is my final to runway 36 in Oshkosh. I'm descending towards the runway. I'm passing over the magenta dot. I was cleared to land on the yellow dot. Getting closer to the yellow dot, flaring, and touchdown. CloudAhoy in Oshkosh. Before showing you some other features of the CloudAhoy system, let me show you a little bit what goes on under the hood. The CloudAhoy flight debriefing system consists of three parts. The iPhone or iPad application logs the flight and uploads automatically the flight into the CloudAhoy servers. Flight is then analyzed by the CloudAhoy servers using a rule-based knowledge engine. The knowledge engine uses information from multiple sources, including wind acquired from multiple weather stations and interpolated for the flight, information for the aircraft registry, and other information. Finally, the data is displayed for you on your iPad or on your desktop or laptop for debriefing. To make sense of the flight, CloudAhoy processes the raw data and corrects measurement errors. CloudAhoy then looks up the aircraft's tail number in the aircraft registry and applies specific analysis for the aircraft's type and model. If you have flown a fixed-wing aircraft, CloudAhoy understands how a fixed-wing aircraft flies and might compute for you the heading on the downwind or how well you have executed the Chandelle maneuver. If you have flown a glider, CloudAhoy will color the towing leg, will compute your thermaling parameters or your gliding ratios. If you have flown a helicopter, well, CloudAhoy will apply the rotorcraft rules, analyze your flight, segment it, and compute various parameters, such as, for example, your vertical speed on your auto rotations. Let's talk now about debriefing instrument flights using CloudAhoy. Here is the debrief tab on the iPad's CloudAhoy application, showing an IPC where I flew 3 instrument approaches into my home airport of Hanscom Field. To debrief the approaches, I add the published approaches in magenta, and I change the background to terrain for better contrast. Let's debrief now the last approach, the GPS approach into runway 23. First, I deselect all the flight segments that are not part of that approach, leaving only the approach on the screen. And I select the altitude and the airspeed profile of that approach. How well did I do on the altitude on this approach? I can look at the altitude profile, and I can also measure specific points. For example, at the final approach fix, I was at 1872 feet MSL versus 1800 minimum altitude for that fix. Well, debriefing now the ILS approach. To debrief the approach, I first turn on the wind vectors display, and then I declutter by unselecting irrelevant segments. CloudAhoy computed for me the missed approach altitude, which was 317 feet, 5 feet below the published minimums. How well did I do on the glide slope intercept? Not so good. The final approach fix minimums are 1800 and I was at 1681. Debriefing the approach in 3D offers additional ways to compare the published and the actual approach, including in cockpit view mode, where you can see here at 4x speed my taking the mist from runway 29er. Finally, for this presentation, flight sharing in CloudAhoy. Here is my CloudAhoy flight list. As such, it has my name as either the pilot or the co-pilot on most flights. But here is a flight that does not have my name on it. How come? Well, it was shared with me. Flights can be shared between CloudAhoy users. For example, a student pilot might want to share a flight with his or her CFI. You can also create a link to any of your flights and then post it in a blog, in a forum, on your Facebook page, or send it to someone in an email. I conclude this presentation with flights shared by pilots in Boston and in Alaska. Thanks for watching.